Good morning. Thank you for coming. Nice select audience this morning. Obviously, too much fun was had last night. But anyway, thank you for those who are here. Right, so my name's Alistair Brown. My talk, owning both ends of the pipe. This talk is about trying to share some of the insights that we gained at my company when we built our product. So we're an ISV, and I wanted to share those with you and also discuss some of the implementation decisions that we made and some of the options for the future. So without further ado. Right, so brief introductions, then I'll talk about some of the background around what we were trying to achieve, and I'll give you a demo, and then I'll talk a bit more about the way that we actually built our solution in the end, and then round up with some other considerations that you need to do. So, I'm an architect at Fairsail. I've been using the Salesforce platform for about 3 years. Prior to that, I was a Java architect working across a wide range of industries. And what I've tried to do is take the lessons I learned in those other industries using very different tool chains and tool sets and apply those to Salesforce. Sometimes that's not always easy, but I think it's really given me an opportunity to do things that are slightly different than maybe if I'd come up from a pure Salesforce background. So I work for Fairsail. So we are an ISV. We have a product that sits on the App Store. We build HR solutions. As you can see here, number one HR system on the Salesforce App Cloud. But what does that really mean? That doesn't mean anything. HR is traditionally quite a cold, quite a remote thing. And really what we're trying to do is we're trying to put people first. People are the most important resource in your organization. So what we want to do is we want to be an employee success platform. So we've got customer success as the Salesforce message. We think you need to be an employee success platform. We want to really drive up employee engagement. If you drive up employee engagement, then you'll end up having productive employees, and employees that are productive are employees that want to stay. And then what am I going to be talking about? So we've got some fairly interesting use cases that I'll come on to in a moment. And what I want to talk about is how we built our product, how we built our application that supports that, and what are the architectural considerations that we had to take into account, and then the solutions that we had to come up with in order to solve those problems. Just summing up here. What we wanted to be able to do was have an extensible architecture. In HR, there's lots of different ways of doing performance reviews. There's lots of different ways of doing absence, paid time off, vacation, sick leave. There's about 50 different HR processes that we support. And we also knew that when we built our product, we wanted to extend that over time. And what we didn't want to have to keep doing was going back to the original base package and then keep on making changes to that and keep on redeploying that. What we wanted to be able to do was build a base package, deploy that, and then add new packages as our customers required. So that was quite a challenge, because that's not really something that we tend to do with Salesforce traditionally. We also knew that because we've got this large number of different business processes, there was a risk that if we just tried to push everything into one package, we'd end up having code that was basically spaghetti. What we really wanted to do was be quite rigorous about how we encapsulated an individual business process so that we could get better testing, we could get better modularity, and it just made it much easier for people to work independently so we could have multiple streams running in parallel for development. With 50 processes, there's no way that we're going to deliver all that stuff to our end users, who are the employees. What happens is we have effectively a shopping list of things that the HR admins can pick from, and they will pick and choose and mix and match the processes that are right for their organization. And that meant that we had to have a very configurable system, and we wanted that configuration to be something that was quite dynamic, because it had to be sort of contextual aware, and it also had to be aware of time as well. So you only do certain things in HR at certain times of the year, like you only do salary reviews around Christmas time, perhaps. You only do talent planning at different periods in the year. So we needed to have a very, very configurable system that wasn't really high maintenance, that wasn't really a big overhead, both for the employees, because we wanted them to have a really engaging solution, but also for the admins, because otherwise, in a large organization, they've got to make changes that are appropriate for every single person in that organization. So there were some interesting problems we had to solve. So I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to the problem that we were trying to solve and the product that we're trying to deliver. And then what I'm going to do is then extract key insights from that. We were one of the early ISVs, so we've been around for the best part of 10 years. We were based on S-Controls way back when, then we moved into Visualforce, and we knew that 2 years ago, we needed to do something different. This was pre-Lightning, so perhaps Lightning might have impacted our decisions, we're not sure yet. But anyway, hindsight is a wonderful thing. But what we wanted to do was we wanted to completely change the way that we delivered and engaged with the majority of our end users. So we wanted a mobile first, we wanted a flat design, as I already said, we wanted this extensible architecture, and we wanted it to be highly configurable. So if I delve into a little bit deeper about why our use cases are slightly different from perhaps other Salesforce apps and ISVs, we work in HR. HR touches everybody in an organization. If you're doing sales or marketing, there's a relatively restricted number of people within an organization who need to use that application. For us, we go everywhere. It's ubiquitous. So we've got a large number of processes that people can pick and choose from. You wouldn't want the employees to pick and choose whether they did absence or talent planning or salary reviews. That has to be something that's done by the HR department. But we still want that configuration to be surfaced through our UI so that users only see a very succinct view of the information that they need to provide. Quite uniquely for us, vast majority of the people who use our products don't know they're using Salesforce. They're completely abstracted from it, and deliberately so. They don't need to know. It doesn't impact on what they're trying to achieve with the product, so it's much best to abstract it from them so they can't see it. And that, again, creates some quite interesting challenges. But it also opens up quite a few opportunities that I'll come on to in a moment. We're a small company, growing fast, but we're still a small company. So we knew that if we want to deliver across multiple channels, we couldn't have lots of different code streams going on. We really needed to be able to deliver the whole product off a single code base. There would be variations, there would be specific things that are channel specific, but we knew that if we had some Salesforce, some Apex, some Java, all sorts of different things, so maybe some native development on iOS or something like that, then that'd be a real challenge for us, and there's just no way we could scale effectively. We wouldn't be agile, we wouldn't be able to deliver value for our customers. And finally, we in HR, when we're dealing with information, we have to think not only of what that information means to me, but what it means to the person who I'm considering. So as a manager, when I'm dealing with HR, I had to think about, am I doing things with respect to myself? So am I filling in my timesheets? Or am I doing something as a manager? So am I approving someone's timesheets? And that really changes the context and the security model and the consideration. So we have to have a UI that's able to respect both of those different views. So given those requirements, this is what we needed from our architecture. We needed it to be extensible, and we needed the business process to be abstracted by a facade so we could really encapsulate each business process. That didn't mean to say they didn't talk to each other, but what it did mean was that logically you could allocate a development team to work on a specific business process, and they could do that in relative isolation. That was good for testing, that was good for agility, because it meant you could allocate a complete business vertical to a team and they could be responsible for the whole of that delivery. I talked a little bit about the abstraction of business process and delivering information that is specific to the person viewing that information. So if we've got a number of business processes, what we didn't want to do is have a UI that had to be all things to all people and somehow be really complicated. What we wanted to do was provide a level of abstraction between the business process and the person viewing that process. So if you think as the business process is your data, then the process interface, as identified in this diagram, is effectively a viewport onto that data. It is highly constrained and filtered, giving you just the data you need for the task at hand. And it also means that you can mix and match and organize this information in multiple different ways appropriate to your use case. So in the end, this is what we achieved. We came up with a very simple layout, very little customization from our customers. They could customize their logo, they could customize the title, and they could customize a single color. Yet that simplicity actually freed them up to do all sorts of different things in the way that they use it. None of those navigations on the left-hand side are the same. Each one's done something that's completely different. The way that they've styled them. Some people have been very rich on text, some people have been very rich on imagery, some are quite plain, some are quite creative. And behind all that, the power of Salesforce is that we can configure this in lots of different ways. On the right-hand side, you can see that we've got, on the top right, we've got an employee directory. And in that employee directory, using field sets, one of our customers has been able to say, what's your preference for coffee in the morning? So if you're going to go and visit one of your colleagues, you can go and pick up their favorite beverage on the way to see them. And that allows our customers to be really very, very personal, yet still have a very flexible and simple framework. So this is the root of this presentation. What was the key insight? We started off not really quite sure how to deliver all these requirements. They seemed quite challenging, quite difficult. And we were thinking, well, what framework should we use? And we kind of got lost for a little while. But the penny dropped after a month of sort of investigation and seeing what different technologies could do. And really what we understood was that we own both parts. Because we're delivering a business vertical, that means that we own the data, that means that we own the business logic, and it means that we own how that data is surfaced to the end user. Rather than the framework having to be aware of what's going on in the business logic, it can then be simply pushed down in the stack to just deal with transport. And if all it's doing is transporting and then making stuff available for each individual process to surface that data, it becomes much simpler, much easier, and suddenly you've got a great deal more flexibility. And what I'm going to do over the next few slides is really give you an idea of how we delivered that. So before I show you the code, I'm going to do a little demo, so bear with me. The demo gods don't always shine kindly, but I'll see what I can do. Before I launch into the demo itself, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what I'm going to show you. So rather than just show you a sort of an abstract use case, I've tried to take one of our existing business processes, which we call recognition, which sometimes is referred to as shout-outs. And really the idea about that is about this employee engagement and trying to connect with other people in your organization. So if someone helps you out, say thank you. And I think that's really important because that builds collaboration, that really drives that sense of belonging. And also what it means is you cut across the teams, you cut across it's not like a manager reporting down to an employee or an employee reporting to a manager. You're going straight to the person who gave you some help and just saying thanks. So in my shout-outs process here, I'm saying that I've got a shout-out object that's related to a user who's the giver, it's related to another user who's the receiver, and for this demonstration, I've linked that to the opportunity. So this seems quite appropriate in the sales world to say thank you for some extra help in order to win this particular opportunity. And there's just a couple of fields that you can have on a shout-out. The reason for giving it, so we've constrained that to a pick list, so it could be some, as you'll see in the demo, there's some interesting options you can put in, but that's configurable by our customers, and some additional comments if you want to give a little bit more background. What's quite interesting to this from an HR perspective is that this is data. When you use this information in an HR context, you can start to see, well, who's thanking who? Is one person always thanking their friend and getting, especially if you've got a reward scheme, are they always getting them free coffees? Or is this actually driving up engagement? You can measure this over time. You can see how people are talking to each other. So there's real business value behind that and real insight. And it's a way of not telling employees that they're being looked at and reported on, but it's a way of doing it very softly and encouraging people to engage with the system and therefore engage with their employer. Sorry. So what's in the demo? So what I've done is I've built a base package which contains a business logic framework, and then in a separate package, I've built my actual shout-outs process. I've built two UIs to show different ways that this framework can support user interfaces, one with Lightning and one with Angular. So I'll start off with my Lightning user interface. It's quite lean in this case. I'm not trying to show you the whole of our product. This is a distilled version of the code that just captures those key insights, which I hope will be much more useful rather than looking at all the mistakes we made along the way. What you can see here on the left-hand side are two process instances, one that's configured for the shout-outs process using Angular and one that's configured for the shout-outs process using Lightning. Since I'm in Lightning, I'll only pick the Lightning version of that. And now you can see that I've loaded the shout-outs process, and I've got a list view of the shout-outs that have been given by me and the shout-outs that I've received. So obviously you can see that I'm quite generous. I like thanking a lot of people, but people aren't necessarily reciprocating that. I can drill in. I can see the details of a particular shout-out, so I can understand a little bit more about why I've received it or why I've given it. And I can create new shout-outs. And what's happening in the background is that when I load this process, I'm going back to the back end and I'm saying, what do I need to do in order to create a shout-out? So I need to give a shout-out to someone, I need to link it to an opportunity, and I need to have a reason for giving that shout-out. Demo gods not shining. So what would do, and normally it was that shout-out would be created and then be added to the list. If I move over to Lightning, I've used Lightning Design System to give you exactly the same look and feel, which is what I'm trying to illustrate here, that this is exactly the same business process. But now if I load it in Angular, get exactly the same information, and I can drill into exactly the same detail. So how did I do that? Well, let's So underneath, this is what the architecture looks like. There's a base package which has the framework, and then I've got a dependent package that's installed in the org, and that contains both the presentation and the business logic for a business process. In the front end, I'm going to have a thick client. That'll either be based on Lightning or it will be based on a framework of your choice. I've used Angular 2 for the demonstration, but there's no particular reason why you can't use React. You can use Ember. You can use the language of your choice. You can also use native mobile apps to talk to this framework. The framework itself is really agnostic. So what's in the framework? It provides APIs. So how does the front end talk to the back end? It provides data transport objects. So how do I encapsulate that data that's being passed on the transport layer? There's a series of Apex interfaces because I want to be able to extend this, so I need to encapsulate my information behind an interface. There's code for registering processes. So when you install a dependent package, it can say to the base package, hey, I'm over here, don't forget about me. There's process instances, which is that abstraction that hides the base process, hides the business process from the front end. And then there's the UI container, which is the thing that actually loads those components. So that's either the Lightning framework or it's a framework that we've built in Angular. And the framework itself coordinates the work of the business processes. So the APIs. there's a few different ways of building the APIs. For this particular demonstration, what I've done is I've built one with Lightning, using Lightning Connect, Lightning Transport Services, sorry, and I've built one with REST. But they mirror each other. They're in lockstep. The API is very simple. It's based on REST. So there's one set of APIs for gaining information about a process, and there's another set of APIs for just doing simple CRUD operations. And if you've got child objects, so for example, if you've got an absence object and you want to approve that absence, then all that's going to do is say that the absence object is just a child. Sorry, the approval object is a child of the absence object. So it keeps it really simple, really clean. If you're trying to populate a lookup, again, that's going to fetch a different type of object, and we use query parameters to constrain the results that are returned. So really simple, object-based, trying to keep it really nice and clean. Data transport objects. So there's only a couple. Firstly, there's the process. The process is effectively metadata. So that tells the UI what the shape of a process is, what the view is going to be, so it identifies the component that you're going to load, and it provides some metadata about the object. So what's the relationship between this process and the business objects? And there's some other information that you can provide along with that, so process name and display name, again, just for decorating in the display. This is the business object. As you can see, it's just an interface. Because the transport layer is dumb, all it's going to do is pass instances of this interface around. It doesn't need to know what's inside them, and that's really good because it means that you can put anything inside of these business objects and they will still get moved by the framework. This is the key interface for encapsulating your business logic. It's basically subdivided into two sections. There's one section around configuration. So that's configuring the process. So what are the query parameters? What are the parameters that have been associated with that process instance? So effectively the filter that view is applying on the underlying data. And a call to get the object metadata. So what does the object that this process support? This contains information about parent-child relationships. So I talked about absence and approvals. This contains pick lists. So for example, for my shout out, this would contain the information about the different reasons that you can select. Because they're not going to change, there's no need to make additional round trips to the back end to fetch that information. And the other half of the interface is simply the CRUD operations that you're going to perform on your business objects. There's a couple of interfaces that we're coming onto now which are really just to help the framework do some of the work. When you've got objects that are defined in a base package, then the base package can serialize them without any problems in order for transporting. But when those objects are defined in the dependent package, the base package can't serialize them. You get JSON exceptions. So what we need to do is delegate that serialization to the same package that owns those objects. And in the same way, conversely, when you're passing an object from the front end, you need to deserialize that in the package that owns the object. So the framework needs to delegate that to the process. So what we've got is we've got the process which encapsulates the business logic, and then we've got two concrete classes that encapsulate how you serialize and how you deserialize that information. And again, that makes quite a lot of sense because then it encapsulates anything that's business process specific to the business process. So when the concrete implementations of these classes, they know that this is what an absence object looks like in Apex. And so they have that responsibility and they have that knowledge, and we don't need to try and that doesn't leak out of the business process. In terms of the framework classes and how we implement this, fairly straightforward. We've got two controllers, one for dealing with processes and one for dealing with the business objects that those processes support. And then on top of that, we've built a RESTful interface, which is just a facade and delegates everything down to those controllers. All I have to do is annotate those controllers with OR enabled, and Lightning Transport will pick up that data and allow me to make those service calls. And then there's an additional class which handles the registration. Process registration is quite interesting because you need to think about I'm going to make lots of calls to this information. I need whenever there's a request to do some transaction, I need to look at this object because there's nothing. I can't cache a huge amount of information. Although caches have recently been introduced in Salesforce, that's not something that you can make heavy use of. They're quite limited in what you can do. We considered storing registration information in S objects, but then that makes it visible. We considered using metadata. That was where we wanted to go, but you can't write metadata from Apex without making callouts. So in the end, we use custom settings. They're cached, they're fast, they're quite lightweight, and they really gave us the security that we needed. So it meant that the base package could own all that information. It wouldn't leak out of the base package. So anybody who installed another package couldn't use their dependent package to make changes about anything that was configured in other people's processes. When I'm actually doing the registration, I'm simply providing a namespace, 3 class names for the concrete classes. I'm providing a component name, which is the handle that the UI is going to use in order to instantiate the business specific part of the UI. And then I'm providing a list of object names. There's no reason why there has to be a one-to-one mapping between business objects and processes. So I didn't want to make that restriction. I wanted to make it much more flexible. And what happens is when you get a transaction coming back, as you'll see in a moment, this information is used to identify the process that you're specifically working with from that object type. So the next series of slides will talk about the behavior of the application when we actually come to make use of it. So the user launches the application as I showed in the demo, the UI framework gets loaded and makes a request to the back end to get a series of processes. So what I need to do is I need to go and make a query to say, well, all the process instances that are configured, which ones are actually visible to this user for this context. So if I'm a manager looking at an employee, what things have I got permission to see? What processes are active at this particular moment in time? And then for each of those process instances that are visible, I now need to instantiate the process. So I go to my process registration, I look up the process class name, then I instantiate the object, then I make the call into the process interface to get the object metadata. That was using Lightning. If I'm using REST, it's exactly the same. Again, this is all about the simplicity. There's no changes in what you do. Simply different API call, but the way the framework works and the way the backend works is exactly the same. And that's one of the key things. We're trying to make sure that whatever UI you use, you're always doing the same things. So then in the demo, I had my list of processes on the left-hand side. User clicks on one of those. And then what's going to happen in the UI, look up the process metadata, understand what the process component is I'm trying to load, and go and load that from Salesforce. In this case, I'm loading a Lightning component. And then when that Lightning component is instantiated, it knows what sort of objects it's going to request, so it's going to fetch those from the back end. As part of fetching those objects from the back end, same kind of idea, got an object type, so I'm going to look up the business process that is associated with that object type, and then use that business process to fetch the data, and then finally I've got to make a call to the serializer in order to serialize that data so I can pass it back to the front end. I did have some issues with Lightning and serialization, which is why the serialization is actually done in the Lightning controller, and that passes strings backwards and forwards rather than actually passing Apex classes. And that's one of the issues that I encountered when you're dealing across this package boundary. Exactly the same with REST. The diagram looks remarkably familiar. Again, always the same way of doing things, whichever API you're trying to use. Creating an object is slightly more involved, but exactly the same sort of themes apply. What I'm going to do, the user's going to create an object. They're going to look up the object, look up any pick lists, going to understand what information I need to show on the form. Again, this is all happening in the process part of the UI. The framework isn't doing this. The framework provides the tools, but this is process specific, because when you're creating a shout-out, only the shout-out has reasons and opportunities that you're trying to look up. Any other business process needs completely different sets of data. So we can populate pick lists from information that's already in the metadata. If we've got related lists we need to look up, such as fetching users, or for populating who's going to receive the shout-out, or opportunities to see who the shout-out's going to be associated with, we need to make calls back to the back end in order to fetch that data. This is just a request for a different object type. The slight difference here is that this is related to my shout-outs. I'm after the users who I have permission to give shout-outs for. And once I've got a set of objects, serialize them, pass them back to the front end. Once the user's happy, they've created their shout-out, although it didn't work quite so well when I tried it. You save the shout-out. That pushes an object back to the back end using the REST APIs or the Lightning APIs. Got an object type associated with the object. So now we can look up the concrete classes and instantiate the concrete classes that are required for that deserialization. We need to deserialize it because it's just a JSON object at the moment. We need to convert it into an Apex object. Once we've got it as an Apex object, pass it into the process. That does the business logic. That creates it as the validation rules. That deals in any error handling. And assuming we get a response back that's the newly constructed object, we serialize that and pass that back to the front end. For REST, exactly the same, all the way through. And then get into the details of actually how you instantiate something from the registered information. So we look up a process. In this time, I'm looking it up by a process name. There'd be an additional step if you just had an object type, and you need to go and look at the object type, find the process name that was associated with that object type, and then look up the process registration information. Once you've got a process name, you can then use the type class, and you can create a type for that name. You have to bear in mind the namespace, so you have to be mindful of that. That's why that namespace is registered when you register the process. That gives you a type object. Once you've got the type object, you can create a new instance of that class. The new instance gives you a class using the zero argument constructor. They need to provide any additional information that process might need, because again, we're respecting process instances, so the views on an object and the context of the object, we need to say, well, what are the query parameters that passed in order to get that in order to make this request, set those on the process instance, and then the process can actually go about the next set of tasks. So is it creating an object? Is it deleting an object and things like that? And it knows that it's doing that in a context-aware fashion. So what I've shown you in the demo is a very cut-down version of the way that we built our product. I think that gives you an idea of the difficulties and the challenges that we faced. But when you're building a real application, there's a whole lot more you need to consider. First off, you need to consider error handling. What happens if there's a validation rule that throws an error? How do I pass that information back up to the front end? How do I make sure that those errors are handled gracefully? Is there something the framework can do to help me with? Got to make sure about usability, thinking how we actually associate errors with the information that needs to be corrected. Translations, we're a global company. We have end users in 150 countries. We have to make sure that whatever UI provide, we can deal with lots of different translations. And every aspect of the UI needs to be translated. We have a thing in our product called Actions, which is basically driving business activity. So rather than just having information presented statically, if there is something that requires a manager's attention, such as an approval, we want to surface that through the UI and give them some visual clues that they need to do that and give them the tools to go and perform that action. So we want to drive activity through the application rather than it just being a passive product. What other things do you want to provide in your UI? Are there some cross-cutting concerns that you want to provide in your user interface? So, for example, for us, we have an employee directory. Since we're the source of truth for all the employees in the organization, we can surface that information and really add value to our UI. And finally, contextual information. What I was doing in the demo was I was just providing things that were related to me, so I'm giving shout-outs. When you're doing things in a real application, you need to think about what are you doing and on behalf of who are you doing it for? So that's quite a quick overview of how we've built things. I've built all the source code for the demo is available on GitHub. That'll give you a much better insight into how things are built together. I just wanted to give you a flavor of the kind of challenges we were facing. A couple of Salesforce links. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the developer guide, but the REST API guide's got some interesting things in there as well worth understanding how that works. And then at the bottom, there's a book that's quite old now, but for those of you who come through the Salesforce sort of learning cycle, these are aspects of design that I've used throughout my career, and I think they're invaluable. And really, the key is understanding how we can apply those in a Salesforce environment. So that's all from me. So thank you very much.